to go live. And it's probably. So we are live on Facebook. Hello, everybody. Stephanie and I are here, and we are just going to be sharing for a moment. And I invite you to do that. If you know anybody who needs some work around relationships, please have them join us. So here we go. Right on. Okay. All right. So everybody, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's going to be really good and exciting. And my featured guest this week is Stephanie McPhail. And so let me tell you a little bit about Stephanie. She has a double master's degree in health and education. She has a BS in psychology. She has 2 coaching certifications, crisis counselor and nutrition, and she is a level 2 Reiki practitioner. She is also the creator, author, let's see, she's the creator of the program, she is the author of the book, and she's also the facilitator of the group called Being Loved Shouldn't Hurt. So thank you, Stephanie, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's nice to be able to do this in the afternoon and get to hang out with everybody when it's still light out.
Right? Oh. We have to change the how our makeup goes on, folks, just so you know that, because of that reason.
Better lighting.
So being loved shouldn't hurt. Tell us a little bit about that, Stephanie.
So I'm the expert at helping brilliant women date up. And I got that certification, if you will, from the School of Hard Knocks. I learned the hard way that unhealthy relationships were not normal, because that's what had been normal for me. And now I actually help women really rediscover, reconnect with themselves and create their best lives. And I'm lucky enough to work with my husband. So we do an 8-week coaching program where we really help people set the reset button when it comes to healing. And so we come from a very holistic perspective, and we just find some amazing results with our clients. And, you know, I wrote a book, I have a workbook, I've got, you know, all these online communities. And so it's just been a beautiful journey to get here, even though it was a crazy beginning.
Well, you know, I feel like that's right there. You know, we have that road, right? So here we've had something. And again, how we do anything is how we do everything, right? So if we are looking at things that are challenging us, what do you do with that? Do you have a pity party? Well, and we all initially do, so let's not have any judgment on that. But do we become a victim? Or do we learn something and do it differently? And either, you know, and doing it differently either is, you know, just changing what we do, right? Like change that action that you take, or getting some help from somebody, right? Reading a book, you know, or joining a group, or seeing a practitioner, you know, whatever that looks like. And, you know, that's what I often find. And I know that Stephanie is getting ready to implement Theta Healing into her program and group. And they are doing Psych K, which is similar. I often say there are many roads to get to where we need to get. And I find that the most effective programs, no matter what the subject, it's one that just not gives you theory or ideas or awarenesses, but also changes it for you. Because for most people, if they knew what to do, they would have already done it by now and they wouldn't need help. So, you know, has that been your experience, Stephanie? Because I know that y'all combine that in your program.
Yeah, so there's a few things that you said that I want to touch base on, and one of them is the victimization, and then I'll talk about the energy healing, the Psych K stuff too. You know, when I was in toxic relationships, I kept waiting for someone else to come and save me. I kept hoping that my knight in shining armor would come in and swoop me off my feet and everything would be okay. And that was, and it was kind of subconscious, but that's what I kept hoping. And I was like, I remember like going out and I was like, please, someone help me, like someone help me. And, but I kept attracting the same unhealthy people over and over and over again. And I was like, and I got to a point where I just thought something was wrong with me. I was intrinsically screwed up. There was nothing I could do. And I was just going to have to deal with an unhealthy relationship. And my first long-term relationship with someone I guess the first marriage, I should say, because I was in a long-term relationship before that, but my first marriage was with someone who was the most abusive that I had ever encountered. It was like the worst of any horrible relationships of the past, all put into one person. And because I was someone that was told to make it work, I was going to do everything I could to make it work. And so even though on our wedding night, he strangled me, and I was so embarrassed and ashamed because here I had my family from all over the place come and visit. We spent all this money. We got married in a castle. Like we had all these great, it was a beautiful,
yeah.
And then here he is strangling me on our wedding night. And it was like, now what? So I was embarrassed. I had a lot of shame, guilt, embarrassment, all of that. And I'd spent all this money. And because I already felt like something was messed up, figure it out. It's probably me anyway. I'm going to have to figure it out. So for 5 years, I stayed in that toxic, terribly toxic relationship, bringing out some of the worst pieces of me. I was dealing with anxiety. I was getting panic attacks. I was having a thyroid issue. My back was giving me problems. I was getting Raynaud, so I was losing the feeling in my fingers. And just my whole body was shutting down. And so
this is what trauma, these are the physical results of trauma. Like,
exactly.
Getting absolutely. And that's what happens with women is that, and I'm not going to say like it doesn't happen with men, right? Because there's a lot going on, but Stephanie and I are both women. So we're just going to share it from our perspective, right? Is that, it's us. It is us. But, it's like you look at, like it's 50-50, right? It takes two to tango, so to speak. And then we're like, but with women, we want to make it, we're 100%. That way, like it's because typically we're with a narcissist that it's that, but and then you end up getting in the gaslighting because you do that, like they feed into you so that it keeps that really, for sure.
Yeah, you get really confused. I had a double master's degree when we got together. I had bought my first house when I was 21. I had always been very successful in everything but relationships. And I just thought, well, maybe I need to figure out what's wrong with him. I got to figure out what's wrong with me. There's obviously I'm screwed up because I keep attracting the same people, but they confuse the heck out of you. So you're like, well, so they manipulate things that happen. And then there's like, they don't talk to you for a few weeks, which is almost like a relief, but also really stressful at the same time. There was just all this like subtle type of abuse going on. And then of course, so there's overt and covert, abuse going on. And so like, you're so used to being in survival that it's hard to think of like how you're going to get out. And so like, when you talk about organization, like I felt like a victim. And it wasn't until I decided to leave where I actually left. And I remember, and it was like a year and a half later, I sprained my ankle and the school I was working at called up my ex-husband and said, hey, because they didn't know we were divorced, your wife is in the emergency room, you need to go get her. And he was there, he came, which was nice of him. But I remember sitting there in the emergency room, like crying and laughing at the same time, because I had in about a 6-week or 8-week period of time, I had gotten a DWI. My grandmother I had gotten a blood clot, and it was like every other week, literally something horrific was happening. Like, it was like, am I being punked? Like, is this real that this is happening? And sitting in the emergency room with a doctor and my ex-husband there was my aha moment. And I was like, you know what? I need to save myself. I need to get the right people to save me. I've got to stop like sitting here waiting like the damsel in distress. And I've got to remove myself from all of this and really make changes on my own.
Well, I think what makes it even more difficult is that it would be different if Stephanie was like a stupid girl, right? But she, again, you got to be smart to get those degrees, right? And again, education has nothing, and uh, socioeconomic background has nothing to do with what happens. It happens on all levels to a variety of women, right?
Mhm.
And intelligence has nothing to do with it. But what I have found, in doing what I've done for the last 14 years and being a theta healing master as well as an instructor, is that once trauma happens, that it, like it again, that this is a pivot and not in a good way, right? That we hear the word pivot right now all through quarantine and COVID-19. But when that pivots, there's something that happens in our brain. There's a switch, right? And then what also happens is that trauma, again, exponentially blown with the shame, the guilt, it becomes a magnet. And then it's, I mean, like I always tell people, when you have trauma, from a theta healing perspective, we say you have these free floating memories and you kind of like carry them around with you and they become a magnet. And two things can happen. You either draw more of that trauma in that makes you feel like you did with the original trauma, or we project it. But no matter what, it feels like you're in a snowball and you're on the merry-go-round, you can't get off, so to speak. Well, we use a different analogy. And so, like, I think sometimes, like, when I speak about it, because this is such a great example, I'm sorry that Stephanie had to go through it to be the example, but it's such a great example because I think I will say this to people. And again, it's in our brains, it's this theory, but here's this real life saying, this is what happened to me. And I am an intelligent woman. I had great success. And where it was leaking out or not showing up was in my relationships, right? So, I mean, yeah, absolutely. So you got help.
I got help. And just to say too, like I was, as much as I knew that being strangled was bad, it wasn't and awful, of course, but it was one of those things where when you are in the survival mode, you're not even in reality in a lot of ways. Because I mean, it wasn't until I went and got an order of protection with a domestic violence support person who said, or advocate, I guess she was. And she said to me, she's like, so I went to go write the order and I'd never done that before. So she's like, let me help you. So she's like, okay, tell me some things that happened. And I started listing them, just kind of like, oh yeah, well, and then he threw me or he did this and he kept me from it, and like all these lists and lists of things. And she looks at me and she's like, he strangled you? Like, you realize that he could have killed you, right? And I'm like, yeah, but I didn't have any broken bones. I didn't have any bruises. And she was like, but he could have killed you really quickly, like much more quickly than broken bones and bruises. And I was like, it was like that light bulb moment for me where it was the reality check of like, wow, I've been minimizing this in order to protect my brain. Like, that was why I was minimizing it. It was survival.
And, because again, something could have gone on in any of our childhoods that would have, escalated this. We could have inherited it, right? So something may have happened to an ancestor. It may have, we may have brought in that type of energy with us into our lives. I mean, we carry around in our soul. There's so many, it's like, why ask why? Like, how did this, but I think we end up like, because especially as intelligent beings, like, how did this happen? How did I let this happen? How did this happen? And like Stephanie said, I think it's so true. You're so in the moment, you can't see the forest for the trees. And then when you get to, step back, right? Because that's such an important piece, and go, if somebody else was going through this, I would feel sorry for them and tell them to go get help. So this is my story, right? Like, it's like, holy crap,
And I was a crisis counselor. So like, I was, it was seriously one of those things where it's like, don't worry about me, I'm handling it. Like, I'm literally on fire. And I'm like, I'm fine. Let me help you. And so it was like, I'm just going to pretend like everything is okay for my protection. I was thinking that I was protecting myself and I was protecting other people because I didn't want them to have to deal with what I was dealing with. I wanted to be kind of quiet. Again, I was the strong one. I was the one I could accomplish things. I was the go-to for people like that. And I was like, I'll figure it out. And so
they need help. I don't. I got this, right?
I'm good. Yeah, exactly. As you're burning, the perfect.
I'm drowning, but throw an anchor to me so I can just go a little bit more, and I'll throw you a life jacket. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the perfect analogy is that frog in boiling water. I mean, you just don't even realize that you are boiling yourself to death as you're in it, because it never starts off with all the horrible stuff. You wouldn't stay in a relationship if someone on the first date called you a bitch. I mean, let's be realistic. At the beginning, it's nice. And so you get used to then the little bouts of anger, the little things that they do. And you might get into a fight with them. Like I didn't like say it was okay, but I kept letting them stay. So after it was like, you get used to it where, being cursed at, being threatened, all those things became normal. It was really normal. So you get this level of like, I would have never accepted this in the beginning, but now all of a sudden, this is my everyday survival place, and I walking.
We become anesthetized, right? And our tipping point becomes, lower, so to speak, and it becomes a norm, just like Stephanie's saying. It's so true. And then you have a wake-up call. You have an aha moment, like she talked about in her emergency room, right? I mean,
you either listen to it or you ignore it. And what happens is the universe, when you ignore it, the universe is like, bam, let me try something else. And it gets worse and worse and stronger until finally you're like, fine, I'll listen to whatever you're saying. I will do it because I can't do this anymore.
Absolutely. And, Mark just asked, like, how often does it happen that this type of situation or vibration or energy, whatever we want to call it, right? Because everything that we have that happens in our lives carries a vibration to it. We carry a vibration. Again, it repels things typically, and it attracts the same, which is why we want to do work on the inside, right? So that that light in our lighthouse is drawing in what we want. But a lot of times we are carrying it in with us, either because we inherited it, it happened like in previous lives, dimensions, paradigms, whatever you believe. I don't want to get out there too big, but it happens a lot. Like, because what happens for most people is they can't even tell you what happened to them, that this would be what happened to them type thing. And that's the beautiful thing, is that and again, I encourage people to get the help that they feel comfortable in getting. But what ends up happening a lot, especially for victims of domestic abuse, of childhood abuse, is that we've done one of two things, or we've done the combination of them, right? Is we compartmentalize or we disassociate, and Right.
Compartmentalizing. I'm like, oh, this is my life here, and this is my life here. And I was able to, and I would completely not think about one of them. And people are like, how are you so happy? Like, oh, well, things are great. And then I'd go home and I'd be like, I can't breathe because I see his car in the driveway. And it would suddenly be reality check. So yeah, compartmentalizing, disassociating totally happens.
And so a lot of times when we do that, right, traditional therapy is always like, why? And if you do those, you're not connected with why. And that's the cool thing about doing it, healing it in another way, is because like with like Psych K or with like Theta Healing, we don't have to know the why. We have to know what is appearing and what do you want it to be, right? And then we can fill that in for you. I mean, not fill it in, but that's all that needs to go on, because people know those two things typically, right? What's appearing in my life now? How do I want it to be? That's the deal. And so, that's the thing, is that And then a lot of times, because, I one time had a mentor tell me, Brenda, you are brilliant. And I was like, thank you. That's not always a good thing.
Mhm.
I got it. Like, I get that. And so, here we are in our heads, right? Because a stupid person can't compartmentalize. I'm just going to tell you that right now, right? So here we are in our heads, and it's like, okay, right? And it's just, that's why, like when we deal with like something like theta healing, right? People can tell me how they think and how they feel, right? Like I said, so where are you at? What do you want? Type thing.
Mhm.
If they knew what needed to shift in order for it to be different, they would have done it by now.
Mhm.
Because we're either in denial or we're just in overwhelm, right?
Mhm.
And Stephanie, if you don't agree with me, just let me know, right? Because I'm just, it's those types of things. And so, that's the deal. And our trauma, our, reason why we're doing it to begin with, are not conscious. It's cellular. And that's why a lot of these, and that's why you really want to, like, if, again, as humans and as our society have evolved, we've had these beautiful modalities that have come into our lives that allow us to deal with it in a quicker, deeper way,
Mhm.
and actually can make it permanent, right? Because things that were like in our, like, I don't know how old Stephanie is, we don't need to know, but I know Stephanie's much younger than me. We know that before that there were ones that were just like band-aids, and they're good, don't get me wrong, they make us feel better, but they're not shifting why we're doing what we're doing,
Mhm.
right? So, which is so important. And so, that's what, like with theta healing, and again, the science is behind it if you're that type of person, right? But what I know is that when I did this, what I was attracting to myself, because I always say, if you want to know what your beliefs are, look at your life, right? Like,
Oh yeah.
don't look at it a day from now, look at it like right now in this moment, and it's going to tell you what's going on. And I will tell you this also, it's kind of funny, and I know Stephanie will get a big kick out of this. I've done, theta healing for 14 years. I used to do a lot of networking groups, and, we do, like, when you do it like a networking group, that, you end up meeting with somebody like for coffee, or, like when we could do that kind of stuff, like going out and just finding out like what they do and finding out like what you do, and just, so that, you can refer people.
Mhm.
Women would hear what I was doing. They'd want to have a one-on-one with me. We would meet. And the reason that they were meeting with me is because their husband, their partner, needed to have a session with me, like always. And I
Mhm.
would just look at them and say, I'm just going to throw something out there for you to consider. The world is our mirror.
Mhm.
If you want your husband or partner to change, guess who has to change first?
Mhm.
And they would just be like, and session after session after session after session, they'd be like, oh my God, you're right. Like, I know this to be true,
Mhm.
right? It's also, if you aren't, and again, this is not a reason to do it, but if that is the person that's for your highest and best good, they'll meet you where you are. And as you change, they'll grow with you. If
Exactly.
it's not for your highest and best, guess what? Right? So, and
Mhm.
I'm sure that Stephanie knows this from experience, from her groups, from everything else.
Well, that's one of the things that we saw. Like, and it's funny because just yesterday I had a phone call with someone who said, "I need your help. My wife and I are having marital issues. Can you see us as a couple?" And I said, "Well, we don't do couple counseling." I said, "But we would do one-on-one. What's going on?" So we started talking, and there was a lot of stuff going on. And just like you said, I did not need to talk to the wife. This was the guy reaching out. I'm like, "It's you that I need to talk to. Like, you big time I need to talk to." And he was like, all right, I'm willing to take it. I said, well, that's good too, because when we stop thinking, when we get out of our own way and we allow someone who's an expert in what they're doing to do their magic, because we can't see the writing from inside. When you're in survival mode, when you're just living your life, you can't really see where you're screwing up. So it's someone on the outside. How easy is it to be like, oh, well, you need to do this, this, and this. But when it's yourself, just like for me, I wasn't able to figure those things out. If I was, I would have done it already, like you said, but I wasn't, because I didn't know what I had to change, what I had, you know, what the issue was. And learning how to look at yourself and say, hey, there are things that I need to work on. The first time I ever heard the word codependent was my ex-husband, who said, you're codependent. And I was like, screw you, how dare you? Like, I was so defensive and angry, and you know, that
Yeah, I don't think does protest too much, right?
yes, exactly. But I didn't even really know what it was. And then I went to therapy, and the therapist is like, you're codependent. And I was like, what? I'm like, that's really interesting. And so, you know, she had me read Codependent No More. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm codependent. Like, that's what it is. I've been in abusive relationships because I'm codependent. I'm trying to take care of everybody but myself. And so when you learn that and you get really honest with yourself and you're able to start connecting everything together, it does change everything else. And I definitely, what I say to my clients as well is, you know, knowing who you are, being comfortable with who you are, then you can attract the right people into your life, and they will grow with you. The people that are not comfortable with you, they're going to fall away. And it might be sad at first, where you might want to try to hold on to them, but they're not there for your highest good. They're just there to maybe guide you for a little while. But then when you grow and change, you level up, and then some people are just not ready to go there. And it's nothing wrong with anyone. It just means they're not there yet. And that's okay. They might be having their own path, their own journey to work through.
And you know, this is the thing, is that people, I've seen it a lot too, are scared to change because they'll leave the other person behind, you know? And right. And then also too, you know, it's that deal, because believe me, we've been, if you didn't, like, if there aren't like all these other areas, you know, go to the movies, right? Watch a romantic movie, watch, you know, you complete me. So like, we're half the person, right? And it's like, no, you need to be the whole person, so that you attract the whole person. You need to be the untraumatized person, you know. And this is the thing too, another piece that is so important to this is forgiveness, mostly of ourselves, yes. Right? Because I always know when I teach a class, like, so we teach a basic DNA with Theta Healing, and we have an advanced, that's the next one. And one of the things I always recommend to my students is that they do a forgiveness list. Like, who do they need to forgive and why? Like, not just in general, like in our sessions, you know, when somebody does an intro session with me, we do like it in general. When you take the class and you have the tool, I'm going to say, dig a little deeper, be more specific, but really look at yourself, right? Like, what do I need to forgive myself for? So if people actually do that, I always know who's done it when they show up to the advanced class, because I can look, you know, in the room and go, oh, they did their forgiveness list, because non-forgiveness prevents us from moving forward. It's one of the many reasons, but it prevents us from moving forward, right?
And people get stuck on that. They got, you know, because I just had this conversation recently with one of my clients, is they'd gotten frustrated because I said forgiveness, and they said, well, but why should I forgive this person for assaulting me or for doing, you know, all the things they did to me? And I said, I can empathize with that, but the forgiveness is of self, because especially as a child, wherever you were in your life, there is this like anger at yourself. Like, why did I let this happen? Why did I use up so much of my life? Why did I use up so much of my energy? And there's all these different, like, you're angry at yourself. And so to be able to forgive yourself makes it so that you don't live there. I mean, I'm at a point now, and not everyone is going to completely forgive the person who treated them badly. And that's okay if you don't. The issue is, make sure that you're not still in anger with them, you know, because you're wasting your time and energy. But like, I've forgiven the exes that treated me badly, because I was a different person then. I allowed that to continue. You know, if I was healthier, I would have gotten out way sooner. I wouldn't have put up with any of that. You know, and I also I got to places that I could never imagine being, but I had to forgive myself for all of those things. And then also say, you know what, they were screwed up. There's nothing I could do about them being screwed up, but they're screwed up, you know, and I can forgive them from over here. Where sometimes clients will say to me, they're like, well, I'm trying to forgive my husband, but how can I when he's still cheating on me? And I'm like, oh, No. You're
Right.
messing up what that means. You can forgive yourself and forgive them, but don't do it while you're still in the trauma situation. You want to get out of it and then work through all that kind of stuff.
Right. Right. Because it has to be done in order for you to forgive, right? Because what some women will, like what Stephanie, like classic, another situation, like I want to forgive so I can stay in the abuse.
Yes.
It's like, no,
Yeah.
that doesn't work. Exactly what she said. But another thing is that the deal is that forgiveness is not for them. Forgiving another person for what they've done to you is for you. Because this is the deal. I promise you, they've gone on to their lives and they're not giving it a second thought. But if you're replaying it in your mind over and over again, you have got to forgive them. You've got to forgive yourself. You've got to forgive whoever your higher powers. You've got to give God. You've got to forgive who all the players are, right? And it's not for them. It does not let them off the hook. You will not forget what they have done. You will not, but it's because, again, non-forgiveness acts like a magnet and you keep drawing it in until you complete it, until you're done with it. And and these, alternative, healing, right? Integrative healing methods, not all of them, but some of the really good ones that look at that and complete it at a cellular level really allows it. Because I always had people they're like, oh no, I've got faith, I've prayed about it, I've forgiven them. And I'm like, oh, can we do a little kinesiology on that? And then they're like, no, when the answer isn't what they want it to be, right? I forgive my ex-husband, and the answer is no. They're like, no, I have. And I'm like, you have it on a cellular level. Would you like it to be complete? Right? Because whenever I have somebody make a forgiveness list, I always say, whether you feel like you've worked on this or not, and if you have worked on it, please include it as well. Just just for good measure, right? Just to be sure, right?
Yeah, and if people don't like the word forgiveness because that's like a trigger for them in general, think of the word letting go, because it's you're letting it go from it consuming you. If you're sitting there angry at something that happened 10 years ago, call it what you want. You need to stop thinking about what happened 10 years ago, however that's going to be, because you're not going to appreciate now and you're not going to appreciate the future. So whatever you want to call it, to not be stuck there in the past, that's going to be what moves you forward. It's just like, something as simple as one of the things I tell clients to do is clean your house, get rid of the junk. You get rid of the junk, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I have all this room. Look, I forgot that I had this, bedroom that I could have as an office, or I have this little meditation space now, or, whatever it is, because you can't bring in the new while holding on to the old. And that's for every part of your life.
She was reading my mind, because I was just going to say that, right? We do it in order to clear it so that we can draw in what it is that we want. But if you do not heal it, guess what? You keep drawing in, it's just, what's the definition of insanity here, folks? It's like, know that, keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting. And that's where, again, the integrative healing is a disruptor, for lack of a better word, for a description and more of a coined word that's more available here for people, is it disrupts it and it releases it and it clears it. And then, that's the beautiful thing, is that it allows you to do it differently without, again, when we're holding on to stuff, we're replaying these loops in our brain saying, I need to be happy. I need to, be in a good relationship, it's all of this stuff. And yet, your brain is not going to create it for you, because our brain is very limited on what it can do, right? So you've got to do it in other ways. So, let me ask you this, Stephanie, is there anything else that you want to tell people before we address the two biggest challenges that your clients are coming up with?
Well, I was just going to say also, just to add to what you said, is that, what I found a lot of the times talking to potential clients and clients is that when I ask them, what is happiness to you, or what is your ideal relationship? The sad reality is that a lot of people can't put that into words. They don't know, you know, and the reason why I wrote my book called Being Loved Shouldn't Hurt, and that's kind of the theme of what it is that I do. When you're used to love being uncomfortable, it causes anxiety, it's stressful, it's all of those things. Like we want love, but why is it that we want this love that's so stressful and like all consuming? Like
that sounds good, right?
Right? Yeah, the romantic love, like you said, on television is disgusting. It like, I hate watching, like it's terrible. Like I watch these movies and I'm like, really? This is what they're teaching people? Or like a love song, and you're like, this is a love song? This sounds awful to me. But we're trained in all those things. So, you know, the best thing I could say is for those of you who are saying to yourselves, hey, I want to be in a happy relationship. I want to feel loved. I want to feel understood. If you're not sure what that looks like or feels like, try to imagine having your best friend as your romantic partner. And if you've had a best friend ever in your life, that should be what your romantic partner is like. It should be calm. You should feel safe when you're there. You should have similar interests. You should be able to laugh with each other. And like the best thing I can say is keep in mind that that's a partnership of two people that are whole people, like you said, who are both working to be the best versions of themselves. And those people come together as whole people, as best friends, to support each other on their journey. And that's really what I hate to say should, but if you're not sure of what you're looking for, think of those qualities when you are looking for someone.
Well, you know, as human beings, Stephanie, we unfortunately, right, it's human nature that we learn what we want by experiencing what we don't want.
Yes.
And, you know, it just is. So, you know, here we are. And then what happens because of that is that we don't know what we want because so much time, energy, brain space, you know, whole thing is consumed in having to deal with what we don't want. Right? Like, how can we, you know, compartmentalize, disassociate, you know, drink, you know, whatever. How can we do all this so that we can deal with this type thing? And that's why, you know, we get into a survival mode, for lack of a better word, and it just doesn't work, and it just causes. So, Stephanie, if you had to throw out there, like, because you've been doing this a while, what do you feel like are the two biggest challenges that people come against in relationships, or that you see like common themes? Or
one of the biggest things that I've seen is not trusting your instinct, not trusting yourself in general. Most people that I talk to, myself included, I saw those red flags. And so if you're not even sure what the red flag is, it's that little feeling inside of your body of like, ugh, I didn't like that. That was uncomfortable, you know? And so you see those things with that person, but because maybe for me, I thought I had to be married by a certain age, have children by a certain age. I had to, you know, follow through with, you know, like I said, I grew up religious. And so like all those things, it was like, I had these ideas of what I thought it was supposed to be. So I ignored those red flags. And so, you know, and some of the red flags, they might be a little bit different, but like someone that I noticed is that, you know, they're driving erratically with you in the car, or they're cursing or being rude to a waiter or waitress. They're rude to their parents or their friends. You know, they lose their temper easily. If they call you any names, if they're cursing at you, I don't care how angry they are, that is actually never, ever, ever okay. Even if you thought that was okay growing up because that's what you witnessed, even if there's no physical violence, words are violent. So if they're cursing at you, like they lose their temper and they say and do things they didn't mean to do when they were angry, and they try to forgive later, every time you say that that's okay, you're allowing more of that behavior to come into your life. So when you notice those red flags, or even things that are like maybe you don't have in common, maybe there's values that are really important to you, look and make sure that you have those values with your potential partner and that you share them, because there's enough things that get in the way during life. You don't want to have these values that are different from each other. I mean, I had actually dated a guy right before my now husband, and he was a great guy. Like he was probably, I wish I would have met him when I was like 20, because he was from Montana, like big burly 6'4", great good looking guy, athletic, very smart, all these really good things. But I'm a vegetarian, mostly plant-based, and he's a hunter. And it was really interesting because we were getting along great. And it really, like, he was just such a genuinely good guy. And at one point he said, he's like, the way this is going, this is a long-term relationship. And I said, yeah, I agree. This was early, like this was really early in the relationship. And he said, but I'm concerned because you don't eat meat and I hunt. He's like, and I know that if I was out hunting, it would hurt you. It would hurt your heart. I'm like, it would. I know that it would, because I don't want to think about killing anybody, let alone animals, nobody. I don't want anyone to die. And so he said, so I would stop hunting, but then I would be angry with you. So
resentful. Yeah.
Resentful for you keeping me from doing that. And then that would ruin our relationship. And he's like, I don't want to do that to you. He's like, I wouldn't want you to change. And I know you wouldn't want me to change for you. That's not fair to either one of us. And I was like, kind of blew my mind a little bit, because I'm like, wow, this is an evolved man we're great together, but he saw ahead of time that value was so strong in both of us that one of us would have had to bend our value for the other one. And he knew that wouldn't work. And he was 100% right. And I was sad because it was the first time I was like, wow, this is a great guy. And he was so great. He knew that wasn't right. So he was good enough to say, I'm going to let you go. And we ended the relationship. And thank goodness he did, because I met my soulmate that I would have never met had I let my values forward them and been with someone who we didn't share the same values. So even with those people where a lot of clients have never been in a healthy relationship, so they finally have someone that treats them decently and they're like, attaching on to them. If you're noticing that you're not on the same wavelength, that your values are very different, then it's not that you have to have lower standards, you have to have higher standards. So keep that in the back of your mind as well as you're on your search, if you are still doing that.
Well, and we're going to do a little work, right, on some things that Stephanie just said. So, just a reminder, right, with Theta Healing, like I say, people can tell me how they think, how they feel. What we create in our lives is what we believe. Also, we hold that at a cellular level. We also hold our traumas at a cellular level, our beliefs and our non-forgiveness. And so what Theta Healing does is it bypass, because our brain wants to figure it out, right? Like we want to figure it out in our minds. So it goes beyond the conscious and the subconscious, goes to the cellular level, and it changes it. You can, it's called Theta Healing because we go into a theta brainwave. Like Stephanie and I right now, we're conversing. This has been great. She's been an amazing guest. And we're, jiving here, but we're in a beta brainwave, because that's what happens when you open your mouth. And I often say, because I am teaching, for the first time in 20 years, the Theta Healing Institute is allowing us to teach virtually. And what I always had people say to me is oh, I don't know if I can do this. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, go into a theta brainwave? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, you do it all the time. Mm-hmm. What we teach you in class is what to do when you're there. Piece of cake going there, but there's all the stuff that you can do when you're there. And part of that is changing beliefs, changing trauma, changing non-forgiveness at a cellular level, and so much more. Mm-hmm. So I really liked, I don't like that people have it, but what I loved that Stephanie brought up was that she was saying that people don't trust themselves, right? And that's huge. And the reason typically that we don't trust ourselves is because we have non-forgiveness for ourselves. We have been out of integrity. I know a lot of people who will keep their word to everyone but themselves. And that's what codependents do. They keep their word to everybody but themselves. So on some level, our subconscious says to us, well, but you're not trustworthy. I don't trust you because your track record sucks, and it's showing me that I can't trust you. So then we're looking for that confirmation and validation outside ourselves, right? Because we can't show up for ourselves. That's the deal, right? It's that analogy that they use all the time when you're on a plane. When and if we get back on planes, right? You've got to put the air mask on yourself before you put it on someone else. So what I like to do, so understand this, Please tag anybody that you feel like will benefit this. Like if you've been like, well, that was a good nugget, that was worth the price of admission, which was free. But it's also too, please share it on your timeline if you feel like, and tag people that you feel like will benefit from this. If we're going to tell you here at the end, like after I get done with a little bit of work, like on how to contact either of us, right? And what we, how we can help you type thing. So what I like to do is I really like to approach everything from a trauma standpoint, because for most people, why they're doing stuff is from trauma, whether or not they can recognize it or see it or know what it is. And that's the beautiful thing. You don't have to with Theta Healing. So it's important to say yes out loud, because our brain's got to hear it to be able to do it. It has to be like put out to the universe type thing, right? And it also has whoever you believe to be your higher power. I happen to believe in God, so I'm just going to say God. God has to know that I want this. I'm saying, yes, I want this. I'm empowered to do it. I am, standing in my truth in doing it. I want it. And that's it, right? So but it's that simple in just saying it out loud, right? Just so you know. So, and if you're watching the replay, which I hope again that y'all share this so that people can see the replay, because they'll get some good information, they'll get some good work. So we want to change that we're obligated. So if we have an obligation, it means we don't have a choice. That we're obligated to neglect ourselves. We want to change that we are obligated to be out of integrity with ourselves. We want to change that we are obligated to distrust ourselves. We also want to change what prevents us from trusting our higher power, right? Because you're not alone in this ever, but definitely if you have a good relationship with whoever you believe to be your higher power, that's what also helps reinforce and build you. Right? So it's that we all need, as human beings, we all need support. That's the best, easiest, quickest way to get support is with your higher power. And let's see. And then we need to forgive ourselves for the choices that we've made that have caused us to distrust ourselves, for the fact that we have trusted people who didn't deserve it. And we need to forgive our higher power for putting us in situations like this. And we need to forgive whoever else was part of this equation that would have caused us to be distrustful of ourselves to begin with. Yeah. So do you think got kind of covered like what we come across with some clients here?
Yes, for sure.
So if you want those, you just say yes out loud. Would you like that?
Yes, let's do it.
And then let's go ahead and just change, which means that we're going to change that original trauma, that original event that we may not even be aware of, that obligated us to love others at the expense of ourselves. We want to go ahead and remove that obligation to be codependent, right? So you can have a choice. I mean, let's face it. Anybody that has children knows, I don't care how much like integrative healing, Theta healing that you have, you're going to be a little codependent with your children. Eventually you allow them to grow or whatever, and then you don't, right? But, it just is. And I also, here's a good one. Let's also change that we're obligated to have love hurt. Right?
Yeah.
So if you would like those, just say yes out loud.
Yes.
I also want to change, like what obligates us to justify another person's behavior, actions, or words, right? And we want to know from that divine, place, the difference between justification and forgiveness, right? Because I think that, some people will justify all day long, right? And make excuses for another person's poor behavior and or abusive behavior. And then, but we also want to know that forgiving someone does not mean that we're justifying what they've done. Not at all. Right. So we want, but again, we can say that intellectually, but we want to know that on a cellular level.
Mhm.
So if you would like that, just say yes out loud.
Yes.
Nice. So Stephanie, tell us like what you got going on, what how can people get a hold of you?
Well, we run an 8-week healing program for people looking to overcome toxic relationships. I have a book, #1 new release in codependency, called Being Loved Shouldn't Hurt. I also have a workbook. We have a YouTube channel, Being Loved Shouldn't Hurt, and I actually run a free group on Facebook that's actually called Codependency Healing and Creating Healthy Relationships. So it's all the things that we do wrapped up into one. So feel free to come and be a part of that. We have over 8,000 people. And every Thursday, we actually do a live training. So you can come 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can set your reminder to come and watch that, ask questions, and get some knowledge about how to stop this cycle for yourself or someone else you know.
So love shouldn't hurt. And then say that again. The free group that you have is
Codependency, Healing, and Creating Healthy Relationships.
Right. So if this is, I often say like, it's a free group, go check it out.
Mm-hmm.
Tomorrow evening, they're going to be doing some more, I'm guessing like this,
Mm-hmm.
type making aware and shifting some things, so that people can understand, what Stephanie and her husband do in their
Mm-hmm.
program, right? Because again, if you don't know what it looks like, how can you say yes?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know what it feels like, if you don't understand it. So that's absolutely, what you want people to do. And for myself, just again, I will just say like, if you have any interest or you know of anybody that has interest in learning Theta healing, which again, I already had learned, I already had like 8 certifications in integrative healing when Theta healing came into my life. And then the heavens parted and the angels sang, and I was like, holy smokes, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. And it's made such a difference in my lives. And it's made such a difference, in my clients, groups, membership program. I mean, right. There are many, many ways that I have this available to people. But so if you have any interest in the class, contact me, DM Stephanie if you have any questions on anything. Absolutely. So Stephanie, also just a quick question, like, can they find your book like on Amazon? Is that?
Yeah, the Being Loved Shouldn't Hurt is on Amazon, and the workbook is on Amazon also. So all you Prime people, they'll deliver it right to you.
Absolutely. And just wipe it down. It's all good, but also too, if you want to, if you have any questions about Theta healing, about the classes, about what a session would look like with me, anything at all, please just direct message me through Facebook. And I will have a nice little something free. I'll give you a little incentive to contact me. I'll give you something for free just for contacting me. So feel free to contact me. Anything else that we need to know, Stephanie, from you? This has been amazing. I hope that everybody else enjoyed it and has gotten some, little pieces of gold in this,
Yeah, and if anybody wants to contact me, feel free to reach out also. I'll do a free consultation if anybody wants to just kind of figure things out. You know, I don't mind jumping on the phone either, but yeah, definitely private message me, join our groups, you know, read the book, whatever it is that you're at. Sometimes people are still in the educational phase and they're not ready to do the work yet. I understand that too. You know, we're not rushing or pushing you to do anything you're not ready for, but we're here when you are ready for that.
So next week, my featured guest is Judy Sarden, and she had created programs for people to be able to teach their children, to give them an alternative to attending school. And now it's so relevant now with what's going on. And she's pretty brilliant. She's a lawyer. She homeschools her children and she's in the know. So again, that is next Wednesday. So I'll be posting that like tomorrow. Once we get off Facebook will be available. So if you want to watch it again, if you want to share it, if you want to tag people, please do. And I will have Stephanie post her group in the comments, her free group, so that people will know like where to find it. Because I know it's kind of a long name and, you know, everybody, you know, so we want to be able to be sure that you can find Stephanie. And also she will also post the name of her book in the comments below so that you can also find it on Amazon or wherever else you'd like to purchase your books from. So, Stephanie, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And I know everybody else, like, give her some love because she is doing something really wonderful, right? Well, let's give her some love. She's doing something really great in the world, her and her husband. And they're, you know, I think it's wonderful to have people model that for us and what's possible and what you can overcome. And it can be different and bigger, better, juicier, lovelier, and everything else.
Very true.
So give them your website one more time.
My website is beinglovedshouldn'thurt.com.
Also the name of her book. So, right. So, all right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I so appreciate it. And I will see you same time, same place next week.